Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today I have a special treat for you guys today. It's funny, on social media, you can run into just about anybody and you can be following people through a bunch of random connections and end up following somebody who's your neighbor or pretty close. I mean, I don't know exactly where you live. I didn't Google your house, but we're both in Vineyard, Utah, and it's a pretty small place. So pretty close. We've got to be
really close.
I'm at 731 North, 150 West. So we're probably in the same development. I think we are. Are you in Water's Edge?
Yeah.
Yep. We're in the so literally we are neighbors. Like, this is not even just figuratively. We're literally neighbors. We'll have to have you over for dinner or something.
Yeah.
That's funny. But I just saw her content, what she was posting on social media, and I immediately was attracted to it as a like-minded thing that was important, and it happened to be something that was in our business, or that I was coaching my people at the same time about choice and your ability to choose how you want to experience your life. And it's not anybody else's job for you to choose that. So we can go into those things, but what's cool about her, I mean, just a lot of things are cool about her, but she has had a crazy life, moved tons, traveled, was married to somebody in the Air Force, so she got to travel out there. Studied anthropology, which is way not has anything to do with what you're doing right now, but at the same time it does.
Yeah.
And she's got a beautiful little daughter, and just is living life how she wants to now, as a process of developing into identifying what her dream was. So we're going to talk about how she got to there, where did she start out, what was she doing, and how she got to here, and where she's headed. And then we're going to talk about some other things as well that will come up during the podcast. So go ahead, Kylie, and introduce us to your story.
Okay.
And how you got to where you are, and why you are where you are.
Oh, there's so many things that got me to where I'm at. So it's hard to summarize and still include all. But yeah, I grew up in northern Utah, just south of Preston, in a little town called Lewiston.
That's where my friends live, and I guess they're
really?
my cousins.
Yeah.
But they just moved there recently.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a way small town.
It is. There's nothing there. And then there's a smaller town southwest of it.
Cove and Richmond. Yeah, super small. The reference I use to illustrate where I'm from is Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
You know the bus stop scene?
Uh-huh.
With Fonda.
Is that where it was mostly filmed? Was it in Lewiston?
Between Lewiston and Franklin and Preston.
Ah.
So all that small town. The chicken farm. I grew up working on the chicken farm. All the things.
Okay.
So grew up there. I had a really good childhood. It had its things, had a lot of things, but I got to be outside a lot. I grew up playing sports. I leaned towards soccer. So high school, I stopped running track and I just focused on soccer. Soccer got me to Wyoming. I took a soccer scholarship to Wyoming at a little junior college in Rock Springs. So many people told me not to go. Ended up being such a good pivotal experience for me. My time at Wyoming, I started my anthropology degree. I got to go to Easter Island. I lived there and did archaeology for a summer. And then I got to go to Mexico on an archaeology field trip, and we traveled across the whole Yucatan Peninsula. all of that stuff really opened my eyes to the world. Having gone from small town USA, Lewiston, to Wyoming.
How many people really live in Lewiston? Because most people hear small town, especially in other countries. They hear small town and they think, oh, so there's probably like 20,000 people there.
No, it was like 1,800, I think was the max.
I don't think there's that many in Lewiston.
I don't think there is either.
No, they're in Lewiston. Maybe in the whole valley. In Lewiston.
No, the valley's bigger than that, but yeah, Lewiston's really little.
I bet there's 800.
We'll have to look that set up.
I'm doing it right now. But anyways, keep going.
Yeah, so then I got another scholarship to go play at a 4-year, finished my last 2 years in Colorado, met my ex then, and decided not to go back for my senior year of school, just due to some family and personal reasons. We got married after a year or two, which is unheard of. I was Mormon at this time. So he went to the Air Force Academy, and after he graduated, we went to Albuquerque, went back to Colorado shortly thereafter, and that's where we separated. And then I think I mentioned to you, that's where I met my father's dad, and we dated for a little while. That's its own whole story.
You met your father's dad, and you dated your grandpa.
My daughter's father.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay, I was like, that's an interesting story. You definitely didn't mention.
It zoned out hard. That was not the right words.
Okay.
Yes, my daughter's father.
So with your actual first husband, you didn't have?
No. So, yeah, my daughter is from a relationship I had with someone else. So that's unique in itself. On birth control, one of those things. Miracle baby. She forced her way here.
That's good.
Yeah. So most recently, I lived in Texas and Colorado. I found my dream corporate job in Denver, beginning of 2019. Got laid off with COVID. Decided to go full-fledged entrepreneur again. And now I'm running my dream businesses. So photography, life coaching, embodiment coach, all the things.
Cool. So let's talk about, first let's talk about soccer. So I played soccer growing up. Loved it, but ultimately I don't like running. And definitely, well, soccer. So I did end up doing track and cross country, but soccer and any other sport, like I tried football, I tried basketball, any of those sports that like run and stop and run and stop and run and stop. My lungs just were not good with it. So for whatever reason, it didn't happen. Probably if I had an inhaler or something, maybe I would have been okay, but was not good. But what do you feel like you learned from soccer that you've carried through your whole life?
That is such a good question, because I think about that all the time, actually. I think watching other people around me currently going through all the struggles that is 2020 and now into 2021, there's a lack of just basic discipline in structuring yourself and pushing yourself to be uncomfortable for growth. And I think that fundamental lesson is inherent in sports. And that's why I'm full-fledged coach, is because sometimes you just need a freaking coach to get your butt in shape. But playing sports really taught me my edges, my limits of like how I can push myself farther and harder, and that I won't die. So I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons. I think too, understanding my abilities as an individual and my contribution in that way, and especially in team sports, and how that flows and plays into team dynamics, and that I can be my unique self and still contribute to like a team setting or a family setting or whatever setting it is. So I think that's pretty inherent and good in it too. Yeah.
I love it. I think soccer is one, I don't know. I know a lot of people, let's put it this way. I know a lot of people who get bored with soccer, and I'm sure that these same principles are in every, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't hear about these principles that I'm going to talk about in a lot of other sports, but the idea of geometry and triangulation in soccer is, I don't hear about it in other sports. Again, I'm not saying it's not there, but it's a very unique concept when you're playing the sport, and to be effective as a team, and having that, whether it's defense or offense, having the triangulation. And I'm wondering what you feel like those types of lessons have taught you in that you could apply to life.
Ooh, I like that question a lot. I don't know if I've ever thought about that difference between sports. What made you think of that?
Well, I just think of a lot of sports, and I think of when I was playing soccer, and it's, again, I've never thought of it until just barely either, necessarily with soccer specifically. But as I am thinking about it and thinking about what's the relation to having a team effort and making sure that you are orienting yourself. Because one thing about soccer, and I was talking to my wife the other day, a lot of people are confused with it. They're like, how is offsides even offsides? It doesn't make any sense. Offsides in soccer is stupid. And I'm like, no, it's very, like, offsides in soccer, I feel like it's the easiest offsides there is. Like, offsides in football doesn't make sense to me. Offsides, like, there's a lot of things. I don't
understand it.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I like watching football, but it doesn't make sense to me. But soccer is pretty simple. Like, if you're past the defender and you get past the ball, you're offsides. It's like, there's not a lot of, like,
wiggle room.
No, really. It's pretty simple. They have a ref standing right there at wherever that person is, and he makes the call. So it seems pretty simple. But what's interesting about soccer is, and every sport, you kind of have to be aware of your surroundings. But I think with soccer, even more so, because there are those, like, zoning rules where you have to be aware of what your orientation to other people, and then make sure that you're always in a triangle with at least two of your teammates, so that if anybody came, you could pass off the ball. And how do we set ourselves up in life to make sure we're in an emotion? And this sounds funny, not a love triangle, but an emotion. I'm not promoting love triangles, but an emotional triangle or a family triangle, something where if there is too much pressure on the ball of life, that there is a way, and that it's been agreed upon, the manner in handoff, the manner in trading responsibilities, or saying, hey, I can't handle this right now. I'm going to shift this, reposition myself to where I can be of more service. And how does that principle of learning when you can have the ball and when you're not in position to have the ball, how does that serve you in your life? Yes.
I love it. The book that I've been diving into again recently, I'm trying to see if you have it over there. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
It's somewhere up here.
Yeah, I'm sure you have it. I love his lesson on proactivity. And I've realized in the last year of life for me.
Once you're teens anyways.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. That is when you really shift out of, like, surviving mode to thriving mode, is when you choose to be proactive. And it's all about, the best soccer players are the ones that take the time to read the field and proactively think ahead and choose where to be and best place themselves. Because it's not even necessarily, there's a lot of players I played with that were really good hustlers. They worked hard. Or there are a lot of people that didn't have the foot skills of other people. The players that I appreciated the most were the ones that shone in their special way on the field and proactively supported the team by being in the best position. So even now, playing as an adult, what drives me up the wall is when no one moves, no one proactively chooses to.
That's because they're fat and tired.
I mean, we're all fat.
Whatever, you're not fat at all, but definitely, I'm not fat either. But from like a health perspective, I don't run very much. And so, like,
I think that's a mindset we choose, though.
That I don't run very much.
That we slow down in adulthood.
Oh no, I agree. I'm not saying that. Well, I would say that depends. I think part of it's a mindset. And then we use that as an excuse to actually take the action, because you don't have to slow down, but people choose to slow down.
And I don't think where there's the physical reality.
I mean, there's a physical reality of me that if I tried to run a mile right now, it would be tough.
But yeah, so just that application, and I love your triangulation analogy. Because even within my own family dynamics recently, I've realized that there's times that I consciously chose to be hands-off in certain situations, and that was a good choice. And I realized that I could have proactively, in a loving way, cushioned for some of the oncoming shifts better. So proactivity, I think, is really what can make a big difference in a lot of areas in your life. And instead of living in reactivity of like, oh shoot, I wasn't in the right position, now my defense is having to make up for me not helping propel the ball forward down the field, in the same analogy with life of like, oh, instead of just reacting to this new thing that's happening in my life, why don't I slow down, assess, and be proactive on what's coming next? Because we can't perfectly, obviously, project what's going to happen, but there's enough patterns in our life that we could understand potentially what's coming in some way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm excited to see where this analogy goes, but just to throw another facet into it.
Yeah.
And people are going to say, well, they have to do it in football. They have to do it in rugby. I really don't know of any other sport. Again, this is very possible just because I'm sports illiterate. I
did play rugby as well in college for a little hot minute.
So. But soccer's a unique sport in which oftentimes, if you're watching your own team will be kicking it, not just a little bit like a lateral pass like you see in football, but like significantly farther back into their own defenders to maintain control of it and then readdress the situation and go forward with a different strategy. Or like even in basketball, and I guess in basketball they have like rules to doing that where you can't go past, you can't go back over the line, but and so you'll see it go back out to the 3-point line and then go in and back out. But it's not the same. I feel like in soccer, it's strategic in that it comes down to the triangles and are you passing it back, maintaining control, and then readdressing and setting up a different play.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'm curious to see where you take that. Because I'm not a soccer, I played soccer a long time ago. But you're coaching. You're making
me fall in love with soccer even more.
Good. Good.
But
so with traveling with archaeology, because probably one of my favorite classes so I studied neuropsychology in school.
Oh, cool.
I think probably one of my favorite classes was the anthropology.
And anthropology does overlap into that. I took neuropsych classes.
So anthropology and archaeology. With what you learned there, how does that help you when you're sitting across the table or Zoom or however you're coaching people at this point? When you are coaching people, how does an understanding of like human history and the way humans have operated in groups and what they've chose to build and these different things, how does that help you better identify somebody's inner needs and really what they're struggling with versus what they think they're struggling with?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, let's go back to soccer just as an analogy, right? You might think that you're struggling with, I can't kick the ball fast enough or somebody's running at me, when really the problem was you didn't position yourself better.
Right.
Like the problem is positioning, not the fact that somebody's running up on you at the ball. And people think the problem is I don't know how to handle the ball well enough.
Right.
The best soccer players don't have to know how to handle the ball because they position themselves properly.
Yeah.
So using that example, how do you know that somebody's dealing with ball handling skills versus they just position themselves poorly and how to shift their positioning? Yeah.
Well, ideally you would have both, right? The foot skills and the positioning, but positioning does in a lot of ways make or break it. Because if you position yourself well and have more time to handle the ball, that changes things. So I would say my anthropology perspective that I took for granted for a long time was understanding larger perspective in human culture in a way that a lot of people don't. Like I didn't understand it until the last year in watching all the like Black Lives Matter movement and specifically our cultural perspective on that because you do gain a way different perspective on studying human behavior. Anthropology is way bigger than a lot of people realize. Obviously, you have a sense of that, but I'll just explain it for anyone listening that doesn't understand that. Anthropology in the US is like an umbrella field, and underneath the umbrella is not just archaeology, study of human past culture. There's cultural anthropology, which overlaps a lot with sociology, actual bones. Why am I blinking? Osteology, physical anthropology, and linguistics. So study of language. And linguistics is actually very mathematical, which blew my mind in my first linguistics class. So there's all these different perspectives I gained from my studies that became inherent to me that I didn't realize were extremely useful in how I've adapted in my own life. And some of those specifically would include like just linguistics. People don't understand that you're limited by your language. You only think in your language, and language is limited. It's cultural. It's a cultural and environmental adaptation. And there's different anthropologists that speak differently on whether it's just cultural or environmental. There's debate around that.
Sure, that's the age-old debate of everything.
Of everything. So just even that fundamental understanding of language is beautiful and important, but you're also limited in some ways by that, can help you understand how to approach someone different. And that different cultures in thinking through different languages. So like the way I approach one person is going to be different than someone from a different culture, because that culture within the language itself is going to shape your worldview and how you handle the world and your environment. And that's when people throw the like, well, it's not scientific. I'm like, well, what science are you talking about? Are you talking about the way the French study? Are you talking about the way Japanese people? And even me generalizing by French and Japanese is like too general, right? Because there's microculture. So just that perspective of how diverse we really actually are, and that there's beauty in that, and that it's not something that needs to be shifted or changed, and it can just be. And approaching people with that, I think, brings an edge I wouldn't have otherwise. If that makes sense. So, yeah.
No.
In human history too, just that things are always changing. Things are always changing.
Which I think is I think that's the most beautiful thing about life, is that it's always changing. It doesn't stay the same.
Yeah. Because what if it were static and we literally were stuck?
That would be miserable to me. I mean,
that sounds like the little definition of hell to me.
Yeah, literally. But what's interesting about that, so let's talk about that perspective.
Yeah.
Because everything we're talking about is all perspectives.
Yeah.
But with that perspective, how many people, not only do they think they're stuck, but they actually want to be stuck.
Yeah.
Like when you present them with the option of, hey, you could grow, their perspective is growth is hell. Growth is hard. It's painful. Change is all that is hell. Yeah. And they actually believe, although they detest most of their circumstances, they have a belief that change is bad.
Right. And
that change is hell, rather than that stagnicity, I guess, is hell. For me, I had that realization, well, when I was like 13 or 14, I realized that my purpose was to be a creator and to be changing.
That's awesome.
And when I realized that, it was the most terrifying thing I ever had. Like, there's a part in the Book of Mormon where it talks about this guy who realizes that that's his potential. And then he says, man, I just wish these mountains would fall on me. I wish I would disappear. Like, no part of him at that stage wanted to be or fulfill his potential. And that's probably the best way I could describe that at that time, was just like, oof, I don't want to be that. In fact, I would be okay if I just exist and then die. And that would be like,
right.
At that stage in my life, that was like, oh my gosh, it was so daunting. Later, once I realized, well, let's go. Why was it so daunting? Why it was so daunting was because at the time I had a lot of crap going on in my life. There was still a fair amount of, not as much abuse towards me anymore, but still seeing abuse in my family towards my siblings. And then I was deeply addicted to pornography at the time, which was a whole nother realm of issues. Anyway, so they had all these different things at the time, and all my mind, right? You're talking about language. Yeah. All that was in my mind was ultimately pain and heartache, whether for myself or for others. And all I could think of creating was more of that. Right. And so the idea that I was to be a creator and all my mind being able to think about creating was negative pain and sorrow, I was like, I don't want to. I would rather not have the ability to create, because then I wouldn't create anything bad. And at that point, I still believed in good and bad. But the point is, once I realized that I could create whatever I want and there's better things to create, more serviceable things, that's when it got exciting that, hey, what is now doesn't have to be the future, and I can create whatever I want. So it was a mindset shift. The fear was that I was only going to be able to create
more of what you already experienced,
more of what I had already. And that was harrowing. It was really like, ugh, no, who wants to do that? Who wants to create more hell? Like, we're already living through this. Right. Nobody else should ever live through this. How about I don't create anything? Because if this is what I'm going to create, I don't want to create it. Yeah, pass. No thanks. And then I went to a really good friend of mine, and he helped me see that I could create. It helped me see two things. One, I would never reach the full potential of creation if all I was focused on was creating darkness. Like, the full potential of creation comes from creating in light. And so I didn't have to worry about having all those powers, because if I stayed where I was at, I wasn't ever going to become a creator. So it didn't matter. Yeah. But if I chose to become a creator, then I could create great things. And that mindset shift over a period of time helped me feel comfortable and excited about, I am a creator and I can create whatever I want.
That's such good insight.
So
insight into yourself. And
I'm glad it happened to me young.
Yeah. 13's really young to click all of that into place.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things that, and any questions I ask on here, you can just be like, no, I'm not answering that. And that's okay. So my goal is to, one, draw as much out of you as I can for the listeners that I think they could benefit from. Okay. And so sometimes I ask things that make people uncomfortable. It's fine. Hopefully these don't. But so you grew up in a predominant Mormon culture. Yeah. You left to to Wyoming. Mm-hmm. This is where you met your first husband, or in Colorado? So then you go to Colorado, meet your first husband. You're married for a few years. Like, what do you feel like? Again, hindsight's better than in action. Yeah. So, you're moving through this. When do you feel like you stopped subscribing to certain religious beliefs that you had before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, like anything else, it was a process, and it wasn't just like a one-time moment that just like clicked. I mean, that does happen, but for me, it started when I moved to Wyoming and just seeing, because I grew up in an abusive situation too. And so for me, logically, I was like, why have I been taught? And obviously this is culture versus doctrine, and that's a whole discussion in itself. But the culture that I was raised in, some of the subconscious training I feel like I received was that people that didn't make the same decisions as me were inherently bad, and that they weren't worthy of heaven the same way as me. And so for me, when I moved to Wyoming and I met people that weren't within my religion, that treated me better than my father did, that was what like shifted everything for me. because my father was my main abuser. So that just logic of like, well, why would my dad, who from the surface is following all these things that we're taught to do within the religion
and the community, all thinks that he's this shining star or whatever
culture. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know your situation, but
yeah, because we can talk more about that too. But just shifting my perspective of, you know, I don't really need to worry about that so much. I just need to love people no matter who they are. That's where that started for me. And then just along my journey, getting really strong promptings that I knew were my own intuition and my own access to higher power, God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. And them directly going against what I had been taught within my religion growing up. That's kind of what subsequently led me to choose to get out of it fully, was just understanding and knowing that that's okay for someone else. Like, that has beautiful truth within it, just wasn't my truth anymore. So there was a lot of little things that led up to that. I got very distinct promptings to get divorced. So that's why I chose that path and didn't understand it then. But again, hindsight has better perspective, and I wasn't growing in that relationship anymore. There wasn't anything more for me within that space. So that was a big shift for me too, was when I decided to get divorced and leave that space.
And so with that, because there's lots of people who listen to this. Some people are struggling with relationships. Some people don't know how to get into a relationship. Yeah. Lots of people don't know how to get out of a relationship. And I'm a proponent of creation and growth. Right. Above all else. And whether that means divorce or not, which I'm not a proponent of divorce. Yeah. Sometimes it's the best option. Okay. Sometimes, and I'm fully aware of that. But do you feel like, had you gone into the relationship with a different perspective or better understanding, and both people having clearly stated what their objectives were going into the relationship, do you feel like there would have been space to continue that? Or is it just like, no matter what would have happened that you can think of, it just, because again, this goes back to the same soccer analogy. It's about positioning. In my mind, when I was dating, and I dated a lot of people, and I would tell them this, and they're like, what? That's so rude. I'm like, look, I need to be sexually attracted to you enough to have sex with you. That's pretty much the extent of that. That's maybe like 20 or 30% of this equation. And girls who are like, think they need to be loved, or they've been raised to feel like they need somebody to love them, or that person's going to be unfaithful, or that. So that gave a lot of girls I dated a lot of insecurity. I'm grateful for my wife that she was able to see past that. It still did give her insecurity, but she saw past that. But the point is, I wasn't looking for this romantic, loving, sexually attractive relationship. Not that all those can't exist, right? But I was looking for compatibility with who I knew I wanted to become, right? And to marry somebody who was bought into the vision of, at the very least, you're going to allow me to become my best self. You can choose whether you want to become your best self. Yes. I'd love for you to choose that, but you're not going to, from ground one, date one, you're not going to hold me back from becoming my best self. Yeah. And if there's any level of you thinking that I should be held back, it's not going to work. And having that conversation on the first or second date with girls, especially in Utah, you can understand. It was a little awkward, and I filtered through a lot of women before I finally met Charlie, and I'm amazed.
Way to have perseverance in that.
But thinking about that, it came down to positioning. Before I went into a relationship, I knew my orientation towards life. Right. I knew my objective was to become a creator. I still don't know what my end goal is going to be. Every time I get close, I'm like, man, there's so much more to go. Yeah. And so that's always shifting. I don't know who I'm going to be in 10, 15, 20 years from now. Right. I know today who I want to be, but in 5 years that might change, So that's an interesting thing. So I'm wondering, in your first relationship, how much did positioning or compatibility, whatever, communication play a role in whether that worked out in the long run or not?
Yeah. There's like several things I want to say to that. So I think that, you know, when you understand that concept of being two individuals within a container, within a space, container sounds limiting sometimes, within a space, and being your own selves and you being allowed to grow and that person being allowed to grow, like there's so much beauty in that interdependence. And I don't think that we're taught how to do that more fully than we have. Like, it's just, we're missing a lot of that. I think a lot of us come out of our trauma, our childhood, very codependent, and we don't understand that that's what it is. So I think it's multifaceted for me. There's one part of me when I met my ex, we were really good communicators. That was one of our like strong suits in our relationship. And I think we both came into the relationship understanding what we wanted from it. I will say that, oh, bless his soul, because after we got married, that's when I started unrepressing my sexual trauma from my dad. And so all of my like buried subconscious programming that was terrible for me, and obviously something that I learned from and is beautiful in that way, came up like so quickly. So
question about that again, because I don't have any experience with sexual trauma, thank God. Okay. Yeah. You know, but again, this goes back to the culture of being, whether it's right or wrong, we're not saying that, but the culture of the Mormon religion in Utah, and I'm just saying Utah because another big thing, I really want to move outside of the state as soon as possible. And people ask me like, why would you want to leave? Utah's great. I'm like, it's not that Utah's bad. It's that anybody who doesn't have perspective outside of Utah, that there's other people who live lives and they're great people, then they subconsciously are programmed with certain beliefs about other people. And I don't want that. I think everybody's a fantastic human in their own right, whatever their choices are. And it's gotten better. And there's a lot of room for improvement. I say, I don't know. I feel like in some areas it's gotten better. In some areas it's gotten worse in that it's even more so confusing in Utah now, because now you have a lot more double standard people. And so it's almost gotten worse. At least the judgmental pods before, they actually kept all their own judgmental statutes. Mm-hmm. Now they're super judgmental while they're out screwing around on the weekend. And so they're not, so then it's like, well, what do you actually believe? Whereas if you go outside of in my experience, okay, this is Sam's experience, outside of the Mormon area, you start to encounter people who they are living what they say they live wherever they are. And if they're failing, they're completely open about that they're failing at their stated goals, and they're okay with it, and everybody in life is okay with it. So I prefer just more openness. So that's a big goal for me. But because that wouldn't have been really talked about, and I don't know your sexual life, okay? But I can imagine that if that's your first experience of really sexual experiences outside of whatever happened to you as a child, then there's really no experience for you to have ever come to face with maybe there was more trauma than there wasn't. And that can be good or bad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've lived in a lot of states, so I've gotten to observe some of the cultural dynamics. I would say one place that was similar to here, in obviously it's multidimensional in that there are beautiful, amazing, non-judgmental people everywhere, and we both know that and understand that. But a place that was similar was Texas. I lived in West Texas, and it had this same like layer of, I want to look like I'm living my life one way and I'm really not underneath. And so all of that is super interesting to me, just because I think that for my own experience, if I had the perspective now that I do back then, I probably wouldn't have ever even gotten married. I don't know. One thing that I wanted to touch on that goes back a little bit is just the addiction cycle that we all get into when we have experienced trauma and we don't understand and realize that that's what it is. And that you have those neural pathways that you build out, and then you wonder why you keep experiencing the same cycles when we experience trauma like that, and we're looking through that perspective and filter, right? Because your reticular activating system in your brain helps you recognize patterns, right? Mm-hmm. It's that adaptation we all luckily have so that we can avoid whatever predators coming our way. So patterns. So for me, for a long time, I continued to live out my patterns until I consciously recognized them. And I'm sure you see this in all your work with her.
How did you get to the point where you consciously recognized it? Like who was the guide, or was it just like you woke up one day and saw it? Because this is where a lot of people listening, they don't realize that coaching or somebody outside of themselves is valuable, and they're too scared to actually talk about their life because they think they're the only ones.
Well, it's like the perfect storm against your progression. Like if you have limiting stories that you can't get help to get perspective to help you stop your bad cycles, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the perfect storm. For me, it was coaching and mentors, and finally breaking through that thought pattern that I wasn't deserving of support. That alone, just like, I'm a human. Every human is fundamentally deserving of support and love, even if that's like the little piece that you pick up and use for a little while. And just like, I fundamentally, when you look at a baby, when you look at your cute little kids, you would never say like, they're not deserving of love and support. You would never say that. What human at the end of the day at some point hasn't been deserving of that, like to the core of them, to who they really are? And so for me, I think consciously recognizing like, okay, I'm a human, I deserve love and support, even though I don't want to share these darker aspects of me, this hurt that I've been through, because that's the other part of the perfect storm. There's so much shame attached to talking about these things that we need to talk about. Well,
and so I did a video on, it's so funny, like the things you talk about everywhere in life when you're talking about them, then you move on. Yeah, it's just funny. So on my Fuel Your Legacy Leadership group page on Facebook, I did a whole conversation about assets and liabilities, and that it's not financial assets, although those could be, but it's a great language to talk about your emotional assets and liabilities, your family, all these different things. And the biggest liabilities in your life, in truth, right, if we go off of what every scientist has said, equal and opposite reaction, then your biggest liabilities, the things that you're most scared to talk about or share, all of those are actually your biggest assets in your life. When you learn to share them appropriately, and and being willing to shine a light on the liability allows them to be put equally on the asset side. And most people don't understand that their biggest pain, their biggest regret, their biggest whatever is actually the one thing that's going to bring the most people to them to be successful in life, whatever their endeavor.
Because we're all looking for connection and understanding. All of us. Whatever human tells you that they're not, they have some story around that. Because at the end of the day, we all want connection and understanding and growth. We really do. It's inherent. So and that you can proactively, back to proactivity, be particular in who you share those parts of yourself with. You don't have to willy-nilly share it with anyone to like move forward. And that's a trauma response that I see in a lot of people, is you over-explain in order to feel accepted. Because if I show you all my wounds, maybe you'll accept me,
right?
Yeah. So you don't want to word vomit on someone.
Well, I mean, so part of it. So let's.
But if you have to start there.
I mean, starting there is good. So I'll share a personal experience because I don't really care. I think it's funny. At this point, I think once I got married, all of this just became humorous. But so because I had, there's a few things. One, I wanted to continue to be part of the LDS Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
And with that comes being married in the temple and having somebody believe certain things about how you're going to behave in the future.
Right.
And then there's just on the ground realities about how humans work. And,
yes.
okay. And so in that process, what I didn't like is I would date somebody for 2-3 months or whatever before I would open up and be like, yeah, so this is my past. I've done a lot of it from their perspective, a lot of immoral things. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's my past. It's not necessarily who I am today, but that's my past. And within telling them that, they're like, oh, he's damaged goods. Right. Yes. And so then it became like a filter where I would tell people that on the first date. Like, hey, so just so you know, this is who I am. This is my past. It's not what I do right now, but it happened, you know, and that would, that was not a good response either, because now, so there's this balance of like allowing somebody to love you or accept you before they find everything out about you, and sharing too much up front that they don't even know who you are now. So they don't really have a frame of reference.
Right.
And so I will forever be grateful to this one girl I was dating, because I was just like telling everybody, she's like, you know, maybe give somebody a chance to get to know you before you completely tell them everything. Yeah. I mean, you definitely need to tell them everything at some point, but not on the first date, you know? Right. And I was like, I've never really thought of that, because I wasn't doing it to like, hey, please accept me, but more of like, I don't want to waste your time or my time. If this is going to be a deal, let's just find out right now, right? I'm super efficient, right? Yeah. So I'm just like, if this is going to be a problem, let's find out right now. Like, because neither of us want to be heartbroken. The last thing I want to do is break your heart. So like, why would I let you fall in love with me if I already know that you're not going to be able to accept certain parts of me? Right. And it's not that, anyway, so that was my perspective. I don't know what the right perspective is. Obviously being more upfront worked for me in the end, and Charlie's awesome, but the process was always interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing in my experience that has helped me understand what to do when is just learning to trust myself and listen to my intuition, my connection to God. Because I firmly believe that's my connection to God, to higher consciousness, source, whatever terminology you want to use. Because it's all the same thing. We're just all interpreting it differently from all of our different perspectives. Yeah, and language. And language and the limits therein. Yeah, so I appreciate that perspective, because I did word vomit on people for a long time. Brene Brown is the one that made me realize she's so amazing. She's so amazing. Thank you, Brene. Yeah. So reading some of her stuff and realizing like, oh, I'm totally spotlighting is what she calls it. But yeah. Yeah, she's incredible. So I'm curious, if somebody wanted to learn more about your coaching or just follow you and get in proximity of you, where would they go? Like, where are you most active? Yeah, definitely Instagram. Find me on Instagram. If Instagram's not your jam, you can find me on Facebook. Yeah, best places. You can reach out to me directly there. Coaching wise, if you're interested in coaching, just message me there. And I do free discovery calls. So even if we don't work together, I love just like that connection and back and forth and all of that. So that's always there. Okay. So what is your Instagram handle though? Kylie June Hansen. June like Hansen. The month. Okay. Kylie June Hansen. Same on Facebook? Yes. Okay. So go follow her, listen to her content. It really is amazing. When I was just listening to it, I was like, oh, this is spot on, perfect. And then I learned more about her actual story, and I was like, oh, this is exactly who I want. And then it happens that she lives down like in the same neighborhood. I didn't know that. That's so funny. Yeah. So this section is called Legacy on Rapid Fire. Cool. Okay. It's okay if you're not prepared, but just do your best. So cool. What do you think right now is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today? Ooh. Allowing myself to be fully in the unknown
and not try to control and understand what's coming next. Like, be in it fully, not flirt with it, be in it sometimes, be in it fully.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever had that good of an answer to that one. That one's good. What do you think the hardest thing you've ever accomplished has been?
Oh, geez. I've done a lot of hard things. Being a single mom. Gracefully. Not in lack as much as possible.
That's incredible. So being a single mom, I cannot imagine being a single parent at all. I'm so grateful for Charlie. So grateful.
Yeah.
So that's the hardest thing. What's the greatest accomplishment?
Coming back to myself, being me fully.
And how long did that process take?
A long time. I would say it in some ways started when I was 17, but fully just in the nitty gritty coming back to myself probably started in 2015. 2015? Yeah.
So about 5 years-ish?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so if there was one habit, mindset, or behavior that you think, hey, this embodies or this has helped me get to my success to where I am, what would you say that one thing is that we could adopt into our lives?
It's going to be two-part. I'm cheating. Trusting yourself, your intuition, and allowing yourself to believe in more and choose to believe in more. Just believing. Yes.
Perfect. If you had one or two books, you can say two if you want, that you would recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience, what would they be?
Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle completely teaches you how to understand your divine value, worth, unattached to anything in this life. That book changed me the most. And Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza.
I haven't listened to that one in a while. I should go re-listen to that one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
He's incredible. Talk about neuropsychology.
Yes.
And just like understanding your physiology.
Yes.
It's nothing better.
Yeah, right? Because it pulls all of it together and teaches you how to be the soul, spirit, human that you are all at once.
Yes.
Yes.
Completely agree. Okay, so this is my favorite question.
Okay.
And this is the last one. So we have to pretend that you've died.
Okay.
Okay, so we're now 6 generations from now. I know you're dead, but it could be blissful. It could be a blissful thing. Yeah. So 6 generations from now, your great-great-great-great-grandchildren, they're sitting around a table discussing your life, the impact you had, and the legacy you left. What do you want your great-great-great-great-grandchildren to be saying about you 6 generations from now?
That I loved myself so fully that everyone around me couldn't help but do the same thing.
I like it. That's good. Hopefully they recognize that they love you. I love myself, but I'm fairly certain that there's not everybody around me loves me as much as I love myself.
Which is fine.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's fine. I couldn't care less, but I think it's funny. That's a good goal. I wonder how I would go about building that.
Yeah. For me, it's about loving yourself in your own way and allowing others to do it in the same, like their way.
Of loving themselves or loving you?
Yeah, it doesn't have to look the same.
Yeah. True. Cool. Well, hey, thank you so much. No, this has been great. We could probably, I know I could keep having this conversation because there's a lot that I didn't get to talk to, but we ran out of time and that's just how it goes sometimes. But yeah, thank you. Please go follow her on Instagram and Facebook, Kylie June Hansen, and just listen to her. You're going to be drawn in. You're going to want to talk to her on the phone. Do a discovery call. My life has changed in drastic amounts from discovery calls, not even paying for the coaching. Yeah. Not saying you shouldn't pay for coaching because that's a whole nother side that's changed my life as well. But
I do them all the time too.
Yeah, they're incredible. You gotta
find a good match.
Mm-hmm. Find the right person for you. Okay, well, thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.